The sun begins to slip behind the silhouette of Vesuvius, dyeing the horizon in copper and orange tones that reflect upon the red-tiled roofs and the cobbled streets of a city that still breathes. Pompeii, proud, calm, gilded by the day's last light, lives one more sunset among the many it has seen. No one imagines that this dusk will also be a farewell. The air smells of freshly baked bread, of olive oil, and of wood smoke. The sound of cartwheels and horses' hooves resounds between the volcanic tough walls that gird the city. It is a familiar, almost hypnotic murmur that invites us to walk unhurriedly, as if we too were part of that millennial routine. And before we begin our journey through this last day, allow me a brief personal pause. I'm also very curious to know from where in the world and at what time you're joining tonight. I'd love to read you in the comments. Because in some way, we are all gathered here, crossing time together, to witness what was and what remained suspended in history. We are in the year 79 after Christ, in one of the most prosperous cities of the southern Roman Empire. Pompeii stretches beside the Gulf of Naples, ringed by vineyards, fertile fields, and villas that face the sea. In the distance, Vesuvius, now known to us as a sleeping volcano, though then no one recognized it as such, keeps silent, almost paternal watch. The inhabitants regard it as part of the landscape, a sacred mountain linked to the gods. And as the day fades, shadows begin to grow over the red and ochre-painted facades, over the mosaics of the courtyards and the fountains that murmur fresh water. Imagine you're walking along the Via dell'Abbondanza, Pompeii's liveliest street. On both sides line up shops, baths, and bakeries. Passers-by greet one another with familiarity. Children run between thresholds, and in the background you hear the cry of a wine seller offering the day's last jug. In the air, a delicious mix of aromas, goat cheese, salted fish, spices, blends with the gentle warmth of the afternoon. The stones under your feet still hold the sun's heat, and in their cracks accumulates the fine dust blown by the Vesuvius wind. Everything seems perfectly normal, as if the world were eternal. The city vibrates with life. From the public baths comes the sound of water falling upon marble, accompanied by the murmur of conversations that vanish into the steam. In the squares, priests withdraw into the temples, closing the doors after the day's sacrifices. The young gather in the gymnasia, musicians tune their instruments in the courtyards, and slaves hurry with jars of wine toward the villas, where evening banquets will soon be held. At every corner there is movement, laughter, everyday gestures that, unknowingly, are being observed by time. Pompeii is no lost village. It's a modern city for its age. It has a sewer system, paved streets, aqueducts that bring clean water from miles away, and even taverns where hot wine with honey is served. It is a perfect portrait of Roman civilization at its height, a place where merchants, artisans, nobles, and slaves coexist. Beneath the constant market hum beats a sophisticated culture, full of art, philosophy, superstitions, and pleasures. As you walk its streets, you can sense that blend of grandeur and fragility that accompanies every civilization at its peak. The walls are covered with colorful frescoes, mythological scenes, imaginary gardens, family portraits. Many of those colors, Pompeian red, Egyptian blue, have survived almost 2 millennia, as if the lava, in its fury, had wished to preserve the beauty it was about to destroy. On some walls, citizens' graffiti reveals simple, human, universal thoughts. Amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all. Satura me. I'm fed up. Or even small announcements of spectacles in the amphitheater. Those messages, traced with charcoal or stylus, are direct echoes of voices that no longer exist. As night falls, the day's bustle fades and torches begin to light one by one, casting golden flashes over the walls. The sky turns violet, and the first stars flicker above Vesuvius's dark profile. From some nearby villa comes the sound of a flute. It is a simple, almost melancholic melody that mingles with the distant murmur of the sea. Citizens ready themselves for what they consider just another evening. Dinner with friends, rest after work, perhaps a story told over cups. No one knows they are hours away from becoming petrified witnesses of history. If we pay attention, we can notice a slight tremor beneath our feet. It isn't strong, merely a quiver. But in recent days, it has happened more than once. Some mention it in hushed tones. Others shrug it off. That's the earth, they say. Sometimes it breathes. The same volcano that has given them fertility, wine, and life now begins to awaken. But for now, no one is afraid. The air smells of promises, not of danger. Slaves light the oil lamps, women adorn themselves with amber necklaces, men pour the new wine. The streets empty little by little, as doors close and silence, pierced by some isolated laugh, takes hold of the urban weave. It is the calm that precedes, unknowingly, eternity. This is the Pompeii we will contemplate together, alive, throbbing, luminous. A night awaits us where art, pleasure, and mystery mingle before being swallowed by darkness. And as the sun's last light disappears behind the mountain, we keep walking, drawn by the warm glow of a house where a banquet will soon begin. One time we'll never forget. Pompeii wakes slowly under the golden light of a new dawn. The first rays of sun caress the rooftops, and the city, still wrapped in the echo of nocturnal silence, begins to fill with sounds. The creak of a pulley at a well, the murmur of slaves sweeping the courtyards, the drip of water over the fountains that adorn the atria. Everything seems perfectly ordered, like a machine that, after centuries of habit, runs without effort. The day unfolds, citizens work, temples open their doors, and the cycle of Roman life carries on, unaware that this will be one of its last dawns. At the city's heart, the Forum Square seethes with activity. It is Pompeii's political, religious, and commercial center, where the voices of merchants, magistrates, and priests cross. Before us, the columns of the Temple of Jupiter rise imposingly, witnesses to Rome's power even in this southern province. Here taxes are debated, amphitheater games announced, and goods sold that arrive from Alexandria, Hispania, or Carthage. Oriental perfumes mingle with the aroma of bread fresh from the public ovens, creating a dense, almost palpable atmosphere. If we closed our eyes, we might think time has not passed, and that we're still walking among them. The streets are alive. Along the Via di Nola, shopkeepers display amphorae of wine, rolls of dyed cloth, and small bronze statuettes. Some children chase a dog, dodging the pavement's uneven stones. A date seller cries his prices, and a woman with a basket of flowers pauses before a freshly painted fresco. Everything is movement, color, and noise. A harmonious chaos that, in its way, reflects Rome's very essence. Order and disorder intertwined. Pompeii is neither remote nor isolated. Thanks to its position by the Tyrrhenian Sea and the fertile lands of Vesuvius, it is a wealthy city, inhabited by prosperous merchants, army veterans, and retired aristocrats. Its houses are adorned with vivid frescoes, representations of gods, banquets, imaginary landscapes. Pompeian red, made from cinnabar, coats the walls with an intensity that seems to burn beneath the sun's light. There are mosaics that show everyday scenes. A dog tied beside the inscription, Cave Canem, beware of the dog, or a cup of wine accompanied by the word salve, like an eternal welcome. The Pompeians' daily life is marked by the rhythm of pleasure and devotion. In the Stabian baths, steam mingles with the bathers' laughter, It is a place of meeting, chat, and rest. On the corners, the thermopolia, the equivalent of our taverns, serve hot wine and spice stews in clay vessels. The slaves attending behind the counter move swiftly, pouring wine from amphorae into blown glass cups, a luxury of the age. On the walls of those locales are graffiti written by anonymous hands, small fragments of humanity that survived Vesuvius's fire, declarations of love, insults, jokes, improvised verses. One of them says, "O Paris, quid non scribitur in te?" O wall, what things are not written on you? That phrase, carved nearly 2 millennia ago, reminds us that the desire to leave a mark, to be heard, is as old as language itself. Between temples and household altars, religion imbues every aspect of life. Pompeians worship the greater gods, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, but also the spirits of the home, the lares and penates, protectors of family and hearth. In inner courtyards, small niches house tiny figures before which fruits, flowers, or a few drops of wine are offered. Incense smoke rises in slow spirals, perfuming ceilings painted with mythological scenes. It is a practical, everyday spirituality where the divine and the earthly coexist without conflict. Days in Pompeii are divided between work and pleasure. At dusk, citizens gather in the tabernae or head to the amphitheater, where gladiators fight and beasts from Africa are exhibited. The crowd roars, trumpets blare, and for a few hours the spectacle erases worries. In those stands, free men and slaves sit shoulder to shoulder, united by the thrill of combat. It is the empire's very pulse, blood, beauty, discipline, and power. If we pay attention, we can imagine the laughter, the shouts, the hubbub of that multitude, unaware that each voice will soon be silenced by ash. And yet, what we behold today as ruins was once a place of hope, of progress, of future. Pompeii embodies the sophistication of a civilization that ruled the world and believed nothing could destroy it. When the sun begins to descend again, the city regains that warm sunset glow we saw before. Shadows lengthen over the cobbled streets, shops close, and citizens return to their homes. From the humblest villas to the richest mansions, they prepare for the same ritual: dinner. In Roman culture, that moment is not merely nourishment, but a ceremony of pleasure, conversation, and social prestige. It is the heart of domestic life, the instant when day turns into memory. Soon, oil lamps will light one by one, and within a nearby house a soiree will begin. That time will preserve like a petrified sigh. Because while Pompeii vibrates out there in silence, Vesuvius watches. Evening falls over Pompeii, and a soft breeze carries the scent of the sea and of the vineyards that surround the city. In the streets, shadows lengthen, and the lights of lamps begin to glow in interior courtyards. Public life slowly dims, but behind the villa walls another kind of activity begins. That of pleasure, conversation, and abundance. Tonight, one of the city's most admired houses prepares to receive its guests. It is the house of the Veti, a place that, even among ruins, still speaks of elegance, power, and sophistication. The facade, sober and discreet, gives no hint of the wealth hidden behind its walls. We enter through a narrow vestibule, and at once the street's murmur fades. The mosaic floor reflects the lamp's light, and a fresco of a winged child welcomes us. Every detail seems designed to impress: marble columns, carved capitals, walls covered in deep red. In the atrium, a fountain lets water fall into a small pool where golden fish swim, a symbol of prosperity and good taste. This space, half house and half temple, is the heart of Roman domestic life. The Veti family belongs to Pompeii's well-to-do class, former freedmen who knew how to turn work into fortune. Their villa reflects the empire's new social order. Men who, though not born noble, achieved luxuries once reserved only for patricians. Every fresco, every statue is a declaration of triumph. The Veti do not merely inhabit the house, they display it as a manifesto of their success. As we advance along the corridors, the air smells of incense and freshly cut flowers. Slaves move with silent precision, lighting oil lamps, setting glass cups on the tables, arranging fruit on silver trays. In the Triclinium, the banqueting hall, everything is prepared. Couches arrayed in a horseshoe, linen cushions, crystal cups brought from Alexandria. In the center, a low table awaits the first courses. The Triclinium's walls are a gallery of myths and desires. On one, the child Heracles strangles the snakes sent by Hera. On another, Cupid teaches a youth to master the art of seduction. The frescoes are more than decoration, they are conversation. As guests contemplate them, they speak of morals, of beauty, of power. Each image stimulates the mind as much as the wine lulls the senses. Little by little, the guests begin to arrive. They are men and women of the local elite, merchants, priests, perhaps a poet invited to recite verses. The greetings are formal, but the atmosphere soon relaxes. Romans place great importance on the banquet, not only as culinary pleasure but as social act. To eat well is a way to show culture, refinement, and status. Dinner is a mirror of the soul, some philosophers say, and the Veti seem eager to shine even in that reflection. Servants bring amphorae of wine and set them in bronze buckets with snow from Vesuvius, carried down from the higher slopes. The host makes sure all cups are full. Before they begin, he raises his own toward the flowered ceiling. "To the gods of the household, protectors of our table," he says, and all repeat the formula with a ritual smile. It's an ancient gesture, almost sacred, but performed with the ease of those raised among gods and pleasures. From a corner, a musician tunes the lyre. Soft notes begin to fill the air, and with them the night opens. The aromas of spices, the warmth of the lamps, and the conversation blend into a symphony of sensations. Outside, the streets remain calm, but within these walls time seems to dilate. Every word, every burst of laughter, every gesture hangs suspended in a perfect balance between life and eternity. As we observe the scene, it's impossible not to think that all this, the lights, the voices, the aromas, will be preserved by ash. The very lava that will destroy Pompeii will keep this room intact, this moment. Future archaeologists will find remains of carbonized bread, shattered cups, rings fall into the floor. Silent testimonies to a night no one could imagine as tragic. And yet, in this instant, nothing portends disaster. There is only music, wine, and conversation. The Veti, proud of their fortune, enjoy the luxury their time allows. For them, the world cannot change. Rome is eternal. The volcano is only a mountain, and the gods, though capricious, are always content with offerings. The night advances slowly. In the inner courtyard, stars begin to show in the dark sky. Slaves clear the last utensils, the lamps burn with golden light, and the guests ready themselves for the first round of delicacies. At that precise moment, as the banquet's murmur swells and the city sleeps outside, Pompeii reaches its most human instant. That fragile point where happiness and tragedy touch without knowing it. Because while the wine keeps flowing and the music rises softly, something deep and ancient begins to move beneath the earth. The Triclinium's air fills with sweet and savory aromas, with laughter, and with the crystalline sound of clinking cups. Dinner has begun, and the slaves, with precise and silent movements, come and go through the hall lit by the golden glow of oil lamps. In Rome, eating was never merely a need. It was an art, a ceremony, a mirror of the empire's greatness. And in Pompeii that night, this art reaches its highest expression. The guests recline on couches propped on soft cushions. They use no cutlery. They eat with their hands, helped by small pieces of bread to lift the food. Every gesture is measured, almost choreographed, because at a good dinner speed matters less than harmony. In the center, on a finely carved wooden table, rest the trays of the first service: black olives from Calabria, fresh figs, toasted almonds, and small pork sausages seasoned with garum, that fermented fish sauce the Romans revered as if it were liquid gold. Aromas mingle: vinegar, honey, mountain herbs, the faint smoke of charcoal. It is an olfactory symphony that awakens appetite and curiosity. Many of these dishes come from the recipes of Apicius, the great Roman gastronome whose De Re Coquinaria will become, centuries later, one of the most precious jewels of ancient culinary legacy. In it are described stews with Falernian wine, meats cooked with dates, fish wrapped in fig leaves, and sweets bathed in honey. For the Romans, eating was a total sensory experience, where taste, sight, and smell joined in a delicate dance. One servant approaches with a bronze bowl filled with eggs stuffed with pine nuts and herbs. Another offers fresh oysters brought from the nearby Gulf of Naples, opened on the spot, served upon beds of coarse salt. Cups are filled with wine spiced with cinnamon, pepper, and rose petals. There is no haste. Romans detest haste. Each sip and each bite must be savored with the same devotion with which one prays to a god. The host, a sturdy man with short beard and white tunic, lifts his cup and toasts the company. May the gods grant us long life, good memory, and wine without end. Laughter fills the room. Dinner becomes a game of conversation, an exchange of stories, rumors, and philosophical quotes. In first-century Rome, the banquet is also a theater of ideas. They talk of the latest amphitheater spectacles, of new trade routes with the East, of the recent works of Pliny the Elder, who describes the world with boundless curiosity. Between course and course, someone recites lines from Virgil, and the murmur softens, as if words had flavor. In the second service come the hot dishes: a small boar, covered with figs, and doused with sweet wine; squabs stuffed with walnuts and onions; a thick chickpea soup with olive oil and bay. The diners remark on texture, intensity, rarity. The empire has brought within Pompeian reach ingredients from the farthest confines: spices from India, pomegranates from Egypt, honey from Hispania. Each dish is a map of the world, tangible proof that Rome rules over all the earth can offer. As they eat, slaves renew the flower crowns that adorn the guests' heads. Some petals fall to the floor, mingling with crumbs of bread and drops of wine. There is soft music in the background, played on double flute and cithara. In this ambiance, the senses blur. The body surrenders to abundance. Outside, the city lies in penumbra. But here within, the lamps glow and the banquet's murmur create a separate universe. Warm, self-sufficient. In a moment of pause, a young slave enters with a tray of desserts: dates stuffed with almond and bathed in honey, small cakes of emmer flour and fresh cheese, grapes and pears freshly cut. Sweetness closes the banquet's cycle, as if the empire's flavors converged in one last caress to the palate. The dinner, however, does not end there. Because in Rome, after eating comes the time to speak freely, to philosophize, to laugh. The banquet becomes a symposium, a space where mind and desire share the table. Voices grow softer, slower. The music changes tone, becoming melancholic. Torches flicker, casting shadows that glide over the frescoes. Outside, the air thickens with a strange metallic smell, almost imperceptible. No one pays attention. Inside the Triclinium, time seems halted, suspended at the exact point where fullness and fate cross without yet touching. In that golden calm, between honey and wine, between pleasure and unawareness, the city keeps breathing. and beneath its foundations, Vesuvius, silent and dark, begins to beat. The banquet has reached its most intimate point. The bronze trays rest empty upon the table. The cups are filled again and again with dark wine, and the Triclinium's air is laden with perfume, lamp smoke, and murmurs. Conversations flow with the slowness of a warm current. Some speak of politics, others of trade or the latest rumors about the imperial court. But deep down, what rules the night is not power nor wealth, but the desire to prolong happiness a little longer, to stop time in that hazy zone where pleasure and calm blur together. The music changes tone. The flute yields to the kithara, which sounds with soft, rounded notes. A young slave, with dark skin and serene gaze, plucks the strings with agile fingers. No one knows her name, but all recognize her talent. Each note seems to glide along the walls, caressing the frescoes that depict gods and heroes. The melody has something hypnotic, as if it could erase the boundaries between the present and eternity. The host reclines on his couch, satisfied. He smiles, looks over his guests, and with a gesture calls for silence. One of them, a poet come from Naples, takes the floor. His white tunic glows in the firelight. He drinks a sip of wine and begins to recite, in a deep voice, some verses of Ovid. He speaks of love and of time, of the fragility of bodies, of the impossibility of holding on to what we love. The whole hall submerges into his voice, into that measured rhythm that seems to contain the very secret of life. When he finishes, the silence is profound, as if the walls themselves were listening. A woman breaks the spell with a smile. She applauds softly, and the poet bows his head. Then she remarks, almost in a whisper, that Rome can conquer the world, but not a lover's heart. The laughter is discreet, complicit. The night has grown light, almost ethereal. Words float in the air like lamp smoke, and between cup and cup, faces soften, distances shorten. In the Triclinium's corners, the slaves watch without speaking. Their movements are precise, invisible. They change cups, clean tables, adjust torches. They have learned to disappear without leaving, to exist at power's margins. Some were born free and were sold by debts or distant wars. Others never knew another life. And yet, in their silence, there is a form of dignity. They know that without them, this perfect harmony would collapse. Among the guests, the wine begins to take effect. Voices become slower, laughter more open, gestures more intimate. A merchant tells an exaggerated story about a journey to Alexandria. Another swears he saw in Rome an eclipse that darkened the entire day. No one checks the truth of anything. At that point in the night, truth matters less than the beauty of the tale. Meanwhile, outside, the wind blows with a faint murmur. The streets are deserted, the doors closed. Only the sound of the sea, distant and constant, accompanies the sleeping city. Inside the house, the diners ignore that the air is charged with a new smell, barely perceptible, a trace of sulfur descending from Vesuvius's slopes. But no one notices. Or, if someone does, they mistake it for lamp smoke. The conversation drifts toward the Romans' favorite theme: fate. An older man, his voice worn by wine, claims that the future is already written by the gods, and nothing can alter it. A woman answers that chance is as powerful as Jupiter. The poet smiles and says with irony that perhaps all we are is contained in an instant, and that instant, though we ignore it, repeats forever. For a moment, all fall thoughtful. Then someone proposes a new toast, and philosophy dissolves in peals of laughter. The Triclinium's atmosphere is now warmer, almost sensual. Guests speak in low voices, lean toward one another. Glances lengthen. The cithara slave plays a slower, sadder melody, and time seems to stretch. There is something in the air that invites confidence, secrecy. In every corner there is a story that will never be told. A forbidden love, a recent betrayal, a promise dissolving in wine. Perhaps the beauty of that night lies precisely in this, in its fragility. Every word, every laugh, every chord hangs suspended in such perfect balance that it seems impossible to imagine it could break. If someone paused to listen beyond the banquet's murmur, they might perceive a deep rumble, a breathing of the earth growing more intense with each minute. But no one listens. All believe that music and fire are eternal. And so, while the lamp's flames cast dancing shadows upon the frescoes, and the wine keeps flowing like a dark river, Pompeii continues its feast, unaware that fate is already in motion beneath its feet. Somewhere in the ground, far beneath the rock, something has just awakened. Night advances over Pompeii with deceptive calm. From the villa's rooftops, the sky seems immense and serene, a black mantle sprinkled with stars that reflect in the fountains of interior courtyards. The air is denser than usual, warm with a slight smell of iron and ash. In the distance, Vesuvius stands out against the darkness, a tranquil mountain, asleep beneath the veil of night. No one suspects that, within it, the earth is beginning to awaken. Through the day, some inhabitants had felt small tremors, slight shakes that made amphorae vibrate or lamps sway. It was nothing unknown. The region, fertile and alive, had always breathed that way. Many remembered the great earthquake 17 years earlier, in the year 62, which damaged temples, homes, and baths. Since then, the ground's movements had become almost every day, a minor nuisance that already formed part of the landscape. No one, not even the priests, imagined those tremors were the warning of something far greater. While in the house of the Veti, the party continues. In other corners of the city, citizens begin to shut the shutters. The north wind blows insistently, bringing a rumble that seems to come from the volcano's entrails. Dogs bark without cause, birds flutter in their cages, and a strange silence settles among the streets, as if Pompeii itself were holding its breath. In the temples, torches flicker before the marble altars. The priests of Venus offer wine and flowers, begging for a peaceful dawn. The superstitious look to the sky for signs, a cloud of unusual shape, a star that shines too brightly. In Rome, augurs interpret the flight of birds. Here, in this city at Vesuvius's feet, men feel only the tremor beneath their sandals and think that the god Vulcan, Lord of Fire, is forging something in his depths. The science of that time could not yet comprehend the secrets of the underworld. The concept of a volcanic eruption did not exist as we understand it today. Vesuvius was simply a fertile, generous mountain from which wines and minerals were obtained. Its danger, unseen and misunderstood, slept beneath a layer of ancestral trust. That ignorance, so human, was at once their doom and their innocence. Past midnight, a stronger tremor runs through the city. Walls creak, some lamps go out, horses whinny in the stables. In the villas, slaves glance at one another with unease, but their masters reassure them. "Do not fear," they say. "The earth always quakes before the autumn winds." Then laughter returns, toasts renew, and life goes on, as if nothing had happened. But beneath the ground, several kilometers deep, magma's pressure keeps rising. With every second, the mountain accumulates energy like a lung swelling in silence. From the Gulf's coast, some fishermen, still awake, observe a faint luminosity over Vesuvius's summit, a glow barely perceptible, as if a bonfire burned inside the mountain. They mention it among themselves, nervous, but none dares believe it is a sign. Mountains do not explode, they say. Mountains are eternal. In the houses, the inhabitants lie down. The streets are left empty, plunged into deep darkness. You hear only the tapping of wind, the murmur of water in the fountains, and, every so often, a dull boom that seems to come from very far away. In the stables, animals grow restless. In the baths, water quivers in the pools. And in the temples, statues seem to watch with expectant gaze. Pompeii is wrapped in a stillness that is not peace, but prelude. Had anyone been able to peer inside Vesuvius, they would have seen a terrifying spectacle. An incandescent mass of molten rock seeking a way out, pressing the volcano's walls, accumulating gases that vibrate like a restrained beast. But that spectacle unfolds far from the human eye, in a realm of fire and darkness. Above, life continues, ignorant of its own limit. In the house of the Veti, the guests have finished the banquet. Some converse in the courtyard beneath the stars. Others take their leave with laughter and promises to meet again soon. The host, satisfied, extinguishes the Triclinium's lamps one by one. The house sinks into semi-darkness. All is silent, save for a faint noise, almost imperceptible. A hum that seems to come from the ground. No one hears it. No one understands. The air grows heavier. In the distance, a dog barks insistently, then falls quiet. Over Vesuvius, a dense cloud begins to form, though it does not yet light the sky. It is the first breath of disaster, the warning only the earth knows how to pronounce. In a few hours, everything will change. But now, in this expectant stillness, Pompeii sleeps, oblivious to the roar approaching. The city beats in its sleep, with the slow pulse of one who ignores that its last night has already begun. And beneath the mountain, in the deep, the fire opens its eyes. Midnight falls over Pompeii with a silence so dense it seems to listen to itself. The streets are empty. Only the far-off murmur of wind stirs the cloths hanging in the porticos and makes the bronze bells of some sanctuary tinkle. From the sea comes a salty scent that mingles with a faint aroma of sulfur, almost imperceptible, like a portent disguised as breeze. The city sleeps under Vesuvius's gaze, and although the volcano looks calm, its subterranean breathing has turned irregular, agitated, deep. In the house of the Veti, the Triclinium's lamps still burn. The wick's golden light draws shadows on the frescoes and makes the wine gleam in the half-empty cups. Some guests remain reclined on the couches, speaking softly, savoring the banquet's last moments. Others have withdrawn to the inner rooms, where perfumes mix with lamp smoke. The air is heavy, almost still. With each breath you sense the day's stored heat and a strange invisible electricity, a tension none could explain. The host rises and walks the room with slow steps. He observes the disordered tables, the remains of dinner, the withered petals falling from the garlands, and smiles with satisfaction. It has been a good night. An inspired poet, abundant wine, laughter, stories, promises of business. Rome lives in every detail of his house, in the marble, in the amphorae, in the way they toast. For him, this evening will remain one more memory among so many. But time, silent and relentless, has already begun to turn that memory into relic. Outside, the wind grows stronger. The olive branches strike the walls, and the torches lighting the courtyard flicker. In the distance, to the north, a muffled thunder rumbles deep in the night. No one connects it to Vesuvius. Many think it is a storm over the Gulf. The Romans know the whims of the weather, but not those of fire. Nature, until that moment, has always been their ally. Inside the Triclinium, the poet, the same who hours earlier recited Ovid, speaks again. His voice is lower, more melancholic. He says that the life of men is like the reflection of a lamp upon water, beautiful but brief. Some laugh, others assent with a silence that smells of wine and fatigue. Outside, a new tremor runs through the earth. slight, barely perceptible, but enough to make the cups vibrate and the candelabra shudder. For an instant, all exchange glances, surprised, and then, as if the discomfort were unworthy of their rank, someone remarks with irony, "Vesuvius is hungry." Laughter returns, though this time it sounds more forced. At that hour, the city is divided between sleep and wakefulness. In some houses, families rest. In others, couples converse in low voices. In the upper streets, dogs do not stop barking. A pair of sentries patrol the forum, and in the baths, the warm water reflects the moon's light. No one knows that inside the mountain magma is rising, opening invisible cracks under their feet. The Triclinium's lamps begin to burn low. Oil runs short, and smoke forms spirals that lose themselves in the half-light. One of the slaves approaches to snuff them out, but the host signals him to let them burn a little longer. He wants to relish the silence, that moment when the night seems suspended, still, as if nothing in the world could disturb it. The music has ceased. You hear only the fire's creak and, far away, the winds murmur over the rooftops. Suddenly, a strange sound cleaves the calm, a deep, prolonged rumble that seems to come from the earth's entrails. It is not thunder, nor a common tremor. It is something different, graver, denser, like the roar of a beast awakening. The cups quiver upon the table, the lamps sway, the frescoes vibrate slightly. The guests look at one another in silence. An instant later, the noise stops, leaving behind an even heavier stillness. Someone tries to joke, but his voice sounds hollow. The host looks toward the inner courtyard, where the moon hides behind a thick cloud. He feels an undefined unease, a sensation hard to name. There is no visible danger, but the air has changed. It smells different, denser, earthier. The wine tastes more bitter. The shadows seem longer. The night, without losing its beauty, begins to take on a disquieting hue, as if reality itself were trembling. And yet, life goes on. The last guests say farewell with embraces. The slaves clear the banquet's remains. The house regains its calm. Outside, the streets remain in penumbra, silent, motionless. Over Vesuvius, a dark column begins to form, still invisible to the city's sleeping eyes. Inside it, the pressure reaches its limit. Pompeii rests in its final instant of stillness, on the exact edge between life and catastrophe. And then, at some point on the mountain, something gives. Dawn has not yet arrived when the mountain breaks its silence. It is August 24th, Anno Domini 79, shortly after the day's first hour, and Pompeii's entire world is shaken by a thunder that seems to split reality in two. From Vesuvius's depths arises a prolonged roar, so deep and powerful that it makes walls vibrate, the ground tremble, and birds take flight in full darkness. No one has heard it before. There is in human memory no sound like it. It is the earth's voice freeing itself, the cry of a god imprisoned for centuries. The sky, clear and serene a moment before, bursts in an explosion of fire. A column of smoke and ash rises with impossible speed, lit from within by lightning that twist around one another. The darkness is stained a deep red, and over the crater a cloud forms in the shape of a giant pine, with a trunk of fire and a crown of dust that grows without cease. From afar it looks like a colossal tree sprouting from the world's entrails. Pliny the Younger, watching the scene from Misenum, will describe it in a letter that reaches us. A cloud was rising, of a strangeness and magnitude, never seen, like a pine, for it rose in a long trunk and then opened into branches. In Pompeii, the roar wakes everyone. Doors fly open, cries fill the streets, No one understands what is happening. Some believe the gods are punishing the city. Others think it is yet another earthquake. But when they look north toward Vesuvius, they understand. An immense cloud rises over the mountain, dark and alive, growing as if it wished to devour the sky. Suddenly, something begins to fall. Small fragments of pumice, light at first, almost harmless, like a drizzle of white dust. The inhabitants raise their hands and watch it in astonishment, unaware that this burning snowfall will be their doom. Temples open their doors. Priests invoke Jupiter and Vulcan. Slaves run with torches. Mothers seek their children. Animals bolt. In the Forum, magistrates try to maintain order, but panic is already an unstoppable tide. The streets fill with people fleeing in all directions, some toward the harbor, others toward the city gates. The air thickens with ash. Each breath hurts. Pumice stones bounce on rooftops, strike statues, cover mosaics like a gray carpet. During the first hour, the rain of fragments seems bearable. Many think it will soon pass. The wealthiest take refuge in their villas, reinforcing doors and windows. Some try to save their belongings: jewelry, little statues of the Lares, documents. No one imagines the eruption will last for hours, that the mountain will not stop until it empties itself of fire. Vesuvius's sound does not cease. It is a constant, deep roar, accompanied by tremors that bring down columns and topple walls. In the house of the Vetii, the lamps are lit again. Servants run, the host gives orders. In the inner courtyard, stones fall hard, denting the fountain's marble. Some guests, still dressed in the tunics of the previous night, seek shelter under the arcades. There is no time to think, only to act. From the sea, fishermen behold the scene in horror. The cloud has grown so much it covers the sun, turning day into night. The horizon becomes an opaque gray. Thunders come not from the sky, but from within the burning column. Waves heave, boats try to pull away, but the sea itself seems to breathe with difficulty. In the following hours, the ashfall grows thicker. Pumice falls without cease, piling on the rooftops until they begin to give under the weight. Screams fill the city, collapsing roofs, breaking columns, fire bursting from houses ignited by embers. The air becomes unbreathable. Many cover their faces with damp cloths, but ash enters everywhere. The sun disappears completely, and Pompeii is plunged into an artificial night, a darkness that throbs to the rhythm of the underground thunders. Fear turns into confusion. No one knows where to run. Some head toward the harbor of Stabiae, hoping to embark. Others remain in their homes, believing walls will protect them. There are those who pray, those who curse, those who simply sit and wait. In a street near the Forum, a woman embraces her child while watching the sky. She says in a low voice, "It is the end of the world." Perhaps for them, it was. And yet, not all is lost. Yet. The air is still breathable, the streets still open, the fire has not yet descended. There is time to flee, though no one knows it. Vesuvius, meanwhile, keeps growing, its column rising to 20 kilometers in height, fed by a fury that seems to have no end. Pompeii, already covered by a mantle of white stone, tries to resist. In every house, life clings to itself. In the temples, statues seem to weep beneath the ash. In the baths, the water begins to boil. In the orchards, trees bend under the weight of dust. The city is alive, but the sky has changed forever. And when everything seems to have stabilized, when the noise seems to lessen and some begin to believe the danger has passed, the earth shudders again, stronger, deeper, more final. The true horror has only just begun. Morning on August 25th does not arrive with light. What should be dawn turns into a dense half-light, a perpetual twilight that wraps Pompeii in an unsettling silence. The sky, covered by a cloud of ash and stone, has erased the sun. The city, only hours before full of cries and movement, now seems sunk in a thick darkness, where every breath hurts and every sound is amplified. Day has become night, and night a bottomless abyss. Vesuvius's column has reached its maximum height, and the weight of the ash begins to make it collapse upon itself. From within it fall bolts of lightning, blue flashes that briefly illuminate the gray landscape. From above descends a continuous rain of stones, ash, and burning fragments. The streets are covered by layers already more than a meter thick, and walking becomes difficult, almost impossible. Each step sinks the feet into a hot, soft mixture, a new earth being born from fire. The taller houses begin to give way. Roofs cave in with a dry crash, lifting clouds of dust that darken the air even more. Those still inside run to the interior courtyards or seek refuge under stone lintels, the only places that seem to resist the weight. In the house of the Vetii, the walls tremble. Slaves try to brace the doors with planks, while the host, his face covered in dust, looks toward the sky and sees nothing but darkness. Inside him, something breaks. The order of the world. The certainty of Roman eternity. Everything he believed in collapses with his roof. The streets are unrecognizable. Buildings coated with ash seem to melt into one another. Only the temples stand out as dark silhouettes in the haze. In the forum, the altars burn, and the marble cracks from the heat. The statues of the gods are covered by a gray mantle that renders them unrecognizable. The faces of Venus, Apollo, Mercury seem to weep dust. Amid the chaos, the priests go on kindling incense and offering prayers, convinced that sacrifice can calm divine fury. But the gods, if they listen, keep silent. Outside the walls, the sea has withdrawn a few meters, laying bare the harbor's bottom. Fish leap desperately upon the wet sand. Some Pompeians take it as a sign of salvation and run to the coast, hoping to board the ships at Stabiae. But the air there is thicker still. The wind blows ash, and the waves, instead of approaching, recede again and again. Pliny the Elder, on the other side of the gulf, will try to arrive with his rescue fleet, but he will die of asphyxiation before reaching the shore, victim of the very gases that now begin to fill the air. Time loses meaning. There is no night or day, only a succession of shadows, roars, and tremors. Torches barely light a span. Ash covers everything. In the chaos, families are separated. Friends lose sight of one another. Screams mingle with sobbing and the noise of fire. In the streets, bodies stumble over rubble and over other bodies. No one knows whether they are running toward salvation or toward hell itself. The air grows hotter, almost unbreathable. The ash mixed with toxic gases enters the lungs and burns from within. Some try to cover themselves with damp cloaks, others hide in cellars. In a tavern on the Via dell'Abbondanza, a group of people take shelter under an arch, embracing one another. They do not speak. They only wait. The darkness is total. With each minute, the volcano's thunder draws nearer. And then the inevitable happens. The column of fire that rose above Vesuvius collapses upon itself, releasing an avalanche of gas and ash that descends at unimaginable speed. The first pyroclastic flow, a burning wave that sweeps the slopes at more than 500 degrees in temperature. It is not lava that destroys Pompeii, but incandescent air. In a matter of seconds, the cloud engulfs the outskirts, advancing like an invisible river that devours everything in its path. Trees ignite without being touched. Bodies fall motionless, frozen in an instant of absolute heat. At the city's heart, the pressure mounts. Walls burst, roofs give way, temples topple. Pompeii is no longer a city. It is a shadow beneath a mineral storm. The rain of ash falls without pause, burying streets, bodies, stories. All that once was movement becomes statue. All that once was voice becomes silence. And even so, even in the midst of disaster, there is a tragic beauty in the destruction. The mountain roars, the sky ignites, and the city disappears wrapped in the very matter that created it. Fire, air, stone, the elements return to their origin. Somewhere beneath that burning sky, someone looks toward Vesuvius and understands that the world will never be the same again. The darkness deepens. The city vanishes little by little, absorbed by dust and silence. And in that absolute silence, there is nothing left but to wait for the earth to finish speaking. The roar fades slowly, as if the earth, exhausted by its own fury, exhaled a final sigh. The burning cloud has spread beyond Pompeii, reaching Herculaneum and Stabiae. In less than 24 hours, the world known to its inhabitants has disappeared beneath a thick layer of ash, stone, and fire. Where laughter, markets, music, and prayers once were, there remains only absolute silence. It is a silence so deep it feels material, as if the city itself had chosen to hold its breath forever. When the first ray of sun tries to pierce the cloud, what it illuminates is no longer a living city, but a petrified shadow of what once was. Pompeii lies beneath more than 6 meters of compacted ash. The streets are buried, the houses sealed, the bodies hidden under a gray layer that, unknowingly, will preserve them for centuries. Time stops here, fixing every gesture, every movement, every story. Catastrophe, in its violence, has achieved what no empire could. It has immortalized an instant. Archaeologists of the future will find curled bodies, outstretched arms, covered faces. But now, in this lightless dawn, those bodies are merely silhouettes beneath the earth. In the house of the Veti, the frescoes remain intact, protected by the ash. The Triclinium keeps its fallen cups, its carbonized bread, its wine turned to dust. The host, the poet, the slaves, all have vanished, and yet their presence floats in the air like an invisible resonance. There is no stranger death than this, an ending that preserves the form of life. As it fell, the ash created perfect molds of everything it touched. When centuries later, excavators empty those hollows and fill them with plaster, bodies will emerge again, with their expressions, their garments, their gestures. The woman shielding her child, the man trying to cover his face, the dog twisted at its chain. Each will be an unmoving testimony to the last second, an accidental statue not sculpted by human hands, but by fire and air. For hours, the volcano continues to breathe ash. Pyroclastic flows follow one after another until Vesuvius, satisfied or spent, falls silent. Around it, the coast has changed shape. Fertile fields have turned gray, rivers have dried, the sea has retreated. From afar, the few survivors watching the mountain no longer recognize where the city stood. They see only a smoking plain, a wound in the earth. Pompeii has been erased, but also protected. Paradoxically, the very ash that destroyed it will be its perfect tomb. Beneath that mantle, houses will remain sealed. Fresco colors will keep vibrating. Everyday objects will resist the passage of centuries. What for contemporaries was the end will be, for history, a miracle of conservation. The city has ceased to be a place to become a time capsule, a letter halted mid-sentence. If we could walk now through its buried streets, we would see a Pompeii paused in mid-gesture, a toppled jug, a mosaic still gleaming, a fallen lamp, a round loaf inside the oven. Nothing moves, yet everything seems about to. It is the illusion of frozen life, the echo of an instant repeated eternally. That is Vesuvius's tragic gift, to erase in order to preserve, to destroy in order to conserve. As days pass, the mountain cools and the cloud dissolves. Nearby Romans, fearful, avoid approaching. They say the earth there is accursed, that the gods punished a city too wealthy, too indulgent, too human. The survivors, few and scattered, wander through neighboring villages trying to rebuild what was lost. All Rome will speak of the disaster for a time, but soon the empire will follow its course. Emperors will change, frontiers will shift, centuries will pass, and Pompeii will lie forgotten under stone, asleep like a story no one remembers to dream. And yet, something remains. Beneath the surface, the air trapped in the ruins keeps the trace of the inhabitants' last breath. Every empty space within the ash holds a story waiting to be told. There, in that mineral darkness, rests the memory of a civilization, intact and mute, awaiting someone to hear it again. Vesuvius, both executioner and guardian, rises silent above its work. Life, despite everything, will one day return to these lands. Vineyards will grow on the slopes, almond trees will bloom, and the sun will once again light what was once ruin. But for centuries no one will suspect that under those fertile fields sleeps a whole city, perfect, intact, waiting for its second awakening. And a time will come when mankind, moved by its most powerful curiosity, the urge to look back at its own past, will reopen those tombs of stone and dust. And with that gesture, Pompeii will breathe again. For centuries, Pompeii remained hidden, asleep beneath its own shroud of stone and silence. No one remembered exactly where that accursed city had been, the one the ancients said was swallowed by the gods. Farmers cultivated vines on Vesuvius's slopes without imagining that, beneath the fertile soil, an entire world slept, sealed at the exact instant of its disappearance. Pompeii's story had dissolved in time, like an echo fading slowly, until chance, that discreet god who always returns the lost, decided to awaken memory. It was in the 18th century, amid the rise of Enlightenment thought, when the first spades bit into the soil of Campania. The year was 1748, and King Charles VII of Naples, curious about ancient tales and eager for treasures, ordered excavations in search of the legendary buried city. At first they did not know exactly what they were seeking. Some spoke of Stabiae, others of Herculaneum, others of an unknown city. What they found was an intact world, stilled in ash, where every wall, every object, every shadow seemed to have patiently waited to be seen again. The first excavators were not archaeologists, but adventurers, soldiers, and laborers guided by astonishment. There was no method, only fascination. With every stroke of the spade, the past emerged with a realism bordering on the supernatural. Tools brought to light frescoes of vivid colors, mosaics that gleamed under the sun for the first time in more than 1,600 years, embraced skeletons, jars still sealed. The House of the Veti, with its mythological paintings and intact triclinium, breathed again after a millennial sleep. The men who found it felt something like vertigo. It was as if they had interrupted a banquet that had never ended. Soon Europe's kings and intellectuals began to visit. The finds at Pompeii and Herculaneum fueled a new fever for the classical. It was said that this discovery had returned to the world Rome's true face, not that of solemn marbles, but of everyday life. Kitchens, shops, beds, graffiti. For the first time, the past ceased to be a distant idea to become something close, human, recognizable. It was like looking into a mirror and discovering that the ancients were not so different from us. Excavations multiplied, and with them, secrets. Plaster-cast bodies were found that kept the gestures of their last instant. A man shielding his face, a mother covering her child, a dog twisted in its chain. Those casts, made by filling the voids left by bodies in the solidified ash, became the most moving traces of the tragedy. They were not sculptures, but people. And through them, death turned into presence, not absence. Scholars from across Europe began to write about Pompeii. Johann Winckelmann, the father of art history, saw in its murals the purity of ancient color. Goethe, visiting the ruins, confessed he had there at last understood the fragility of human greatness. Each visitor, each gaze, added new meaning to the stone's silence. Pompeii became a mirror where modern man could contemplate both his progress and his frailty. Over the years, excavations grew more careful. Archaeologists began to work methodically, with respect, aware that they were unearthing not only objects but lives. They uncovered the erotic frescoes of the lupanar, the domestic symbols that spoke of love and superstition, the writings on the walls that revealed everyday thoughts. Each find added a new voice to the past's silent chorus. Pompeii was no longer a tomb, but a dialogue between centuries. But beyond scholarly knowledge, the rediscovery had a deeper effect. It returned to humanity an awareness of time. For the first time, people understood that history is measured not only in empires and battles, but also in everyday gestures, in anonymous lives that vanish, leaving no more trace than a little spoon, an inscription, or a forgotten cup of wine. Pompeii taught us that the past is not dead, it simply waits. As the city came to light, Vesuvius stood in the background, calm, almost compassionate. From its slopes, visitors saw the newly unearthed streets, the ruts of carts still marked in the ground, the fountains that once offered water. It was as if time had folded back upon itself to offer us a lesson. Everything that disappears can be remembered. Everything fire erases can be rewritten by human curiosity. Today, to walk through Pompeii is to traverse a border between life and memory. Every house, every stone, still speaks in a low voice, as if telling its story to whoever stops to listen. And perhaps that is what most binds us to them, the need to leave a trace, to be remembered, for someone, in some future, to pronounce our name among the ruins. Because in the end, Pompeii's rediscovery did not only return a city to us, it returned the awareness of our own fleetingness. And there remains one more corner where that lesson becomes visible, a place where time seems to have halted forever, waiting for whoever dares to look. The air in Pompeii today has a strange stillness, as if it still held within it an ancient echo. The visitor who wanders its streets senses that every stone keeps a held breath, every wall a memory still murmuring. At first glance, it is a city in ruins. Yet walking among its shadows, one understands it is not empty, but suspended in time, like an interrupted sentence that never quite finished. The sun falls upon reconstructed mosaics, upon truncated columns, upon the remains of houses that once staged full lives. Archaeologists and travelers move forward in silence, almost in reverence, because they know that here silence is sacred. What lava destroyed, ash preserved. What death buried, time has returned with impossible fidelity. Every corner of Pompeii is a mirror reflecting not only the past, but also memory's persistence. In the house of the Veti, time seems to have stopped just before the last toast. The frescoes look alive. Colors still throb upon the walls. Mosaics show fruit, gods, birds, and faces that have outlasted centuries. In a corner of the Triclinium, archaeologists found the remains of a table. Upon it, a blackened loaf of bread, a broken cup, and the outline of a jug that still keeps the sheen of the wine it once held. It is a minimal testimony, and yet it contains an entire story. If one closes one's eyes, one can imagine that summer night revived once more, The murmur of voices, the sound of the lyre, the shine of oil in the lamps. The banquet that death interrupted continues now in the world's memory. The diners are absent, but their presence floats in the air, sustained by shadows and objects. They are ghosts without grief or anger, figures that do not frighten, but invite silence and contemplation. Pompeii, in its ruin, teaches us a lesson that transcends history. Beauty resides not only in what endures, but also in what is interrupted. In every worn wall, in every face sealed by ash, there is a different kind of eternity, one that depends not on time, but on the gaze. It is no accident that those who visit the city speak in low voices. Something here demands respect, as if it were still a temple, or rather, an altar to life itself. Excavations keep revealing details each year. Utensils, paintings, food remains, names written in charcoal on the walls. They are pieces of a puzzle that will never be fully complete, because Pompeii is not a finished museum, but an open conversation between past and present. Here, every find is a question, and every fragment an incomplete answer. History is not closed. It goes on beating beneath the dust, awaiting new eyes to rediscover it. But beyond science, there is something emotional, almost spiritual, in the way the city stands. It is impossible not to feel empathy for those lives halted mid-gesture, the woman who flees, the man who shields his face, the dog that struggles against its chain. They are human scenes, so simple and so deep that they transcend time. To look at them is to recognize oneself, for in those motionless bodies there is something of ours: fear, tenderness, hope, surprise before the inevitable. Each evening, when the sun slips behind Vesuvius and the sky turns orange and violet, the ruins seem to rekindle. The walls take on a warm tone, the shadows lengthen, as if trying to recover the shape of those who cast them 2 millennia ago. It is the instant when the past seems closest, almost tangible. One could swear that, in twilight silence, one still hears the far-off sound of a cup being raised, of a laugh fading, of a flute melody lost among gardens. Pompeii was not only destruction, it was a pause that allowed humanity to look at itself in the mirror of time. What tragedy froze, curiosity brought back to life. And so each visitor who treads its streets continues that cycle, giving new meaning to what fire had silenced. Perhaps that is true immortality, not that of bodies, but of the stories we keep telling again and again, each time with a different shade. The Vetes banquet never ended. It remains here, laid upon the table of time, waiting for us to sit beside them, share the wine of memory, and listen once more to Vesuvius's distant murmur. The lamps still burn, the shadows still dance, the silence still breathes. Because Pompeii, more than a ruin, is a conversation suspended between fire and eternity. And as the sun disappears behind the mountain, it seems to tell us, in its language of stone and ash, that no story ever wholly dies, if someone remains willing to hear it. And so, between shadow and memory, we leave behind Pompeii's silent streets, a place where time stopped to remind us how fragile and how beautiful a single instant can be. If this journey through history kept you company tonight, tell me in the comments which part impressed you most. And don't forget to subscribe to keep exploring the past's secrets with me. Good night.